Hello, welcome to Enchantment of Eternity's thoughts on The Defenders Season 1, Episode 1. This video is part of a series of videos where I'll just give some thoughts on the top of my head right after watching each episode of The Defenders. I'll be doing one of these for each episode of The Defenders. Now, I differentiate this from calling it a review because reviews I give a lot of thought to. I sort of type out a script and I edit it and I think a lot. These thoughts on is just me in the microphone just recording whatever I'm thinking after watching each episode, directly after watching it. And this episode was interesting. It was mostly just a setup episode, so I don't really have much to say about it. It sort of reoriented us with the four different characters. Now, the one thing most notably about this episode is that it tells me if you haven't seen any of the other Marvel Netflix shows and you watch The Defenders, you're not really going to know what's going on. It's obvious the show assumes that you've seen all the other shows. Now, I'm not actually saying that's a bad thing. In some ways, that's actually a good thing because if it, tried to sort of tell all this explanation of what happened before, then it would be kind of boring. So it's actually kind of good that they just jump straight into what's going on in the future. But all of this sort of other shows left off on a cliffhanger of sorts. With Daredevil, he's apparently stopped being Daredevil, and he's told his girlfriend about it, and she left him over it. And Jessica Jones apparently is there's a bit of disconnect with Jessica Jones because I just watched the end of it and didn't mention anything about her quitting private detective work. In fact, the season ended with apparently the guy was answering the phone like he was her secretary, and it seemed like she was getting all his work. So this is actually a new development that she's just been sitting around drinking and not doing any work. So that's actually kind of different from when they left off. With Luke Cage, he was sent to prison in Georgia, which is a big cliffhanger, and that cliffhanger gets resolved literally in the first time we see him. So kind of makes that whole cliffhanger pointless, really. I suppose it just goes to show that he was away for a time. And with the Iron Fist, Danny Rand, last time we saw him, he learned that his magical home or whatever where he grew up was gone. Like, he couldn't find it anymore. So we see him here having nightmares about him thinking it was his fault that they're all dead. So anyone who hadn't seen these previous shows wouldn't really get any of that, wouldn't know what the hell is going on. And plus you have all the side characters in each of the storylines. And with Danny Rand, we see him, he's off in Cambodia trying to track down the Hand, so he's still in the mission. And so that was pretty cool. So this episode basically just follows each of the four different characters and their own storylines. So they haven't met up yet, so they're still building to that, and that's a slow build, and that's fine. I think that's much better than if they had rushed it and immediately throw them together. So I think we're going to be building to that. So it's mainly just reorientating us with what's going on with each of them. And then of course we're introduced to this main villain played by Sigourney Weaver, who's up to no good. And at the end of the episode we see her with Elektra, who we saw from the end of Daredevil Season 2 was, in fact, still alive. Now, some people will probably tell me in the comments, but like I'm saying, this is just me blabbering after just watching the episode once, so I didn't have time to pause it or freeze frame. But I got the impression that Iron Fist, at the very first scene, that was Elektra that he was fighting, but maybe not. Maybe I'm wrong, but it seemed like she, it was this woman who's very badass, and he was like, "Who is that woman?" So it seems like it's just not some random woman. It's probably Elektra. That's what I'm thinking anyway. So apparently she's like evil now because she was brought back to life from the Hand. So as far as, Matt Murdock is concerned, she's dead. So we see him. And here he's sort of mourning her death and saying, how would she want me to live? Little does he know that she's alive again and she's evil. So that's going to be interesting how that plays out. And of course, we get our first crossover with Foggy, who, he had a big falling out with Matt Murdock for good reason at the end of Daredevil Season 2. So they're not on talking terms. But you see him. He was the one who got Luke Cage out immediately. And I don't know. That was probably the only thing that really bothered me about the episode was just how quickly Luke Cage got a prison. Why even send him to prison? Why bother with that? And then they're talking about, with Luke Cage, they're talking about Mariah and Shade sort of controlling Harlem and doing all this nasty shit, and he wants to put a stop to that. But it does make me, I don't even know if these two characters will appear in the Defenders. Maybe not. Maybe, I'm not sure if this will actually be followed up on, because we do see him talk to a young man whose brother just died, and the sister was the one that was killed by Mariah and Shades at the end of the Luke Cage series, which was really tragic. And so he wants to do right by her. So that is building up the storyline with Mariah and Shades, but whether or not they'll follow up on it, or if it's just a misnomer and Luke Cage will end up getting misdirected to something else, or maybe through his investigation of her will lead back to the Hand. I'm not sure, but we do know that the Hand is the main villain of this series, but that doesn't mean that they're not going to have other villains. Which is interesting. So Jessica Jones, that's another thing that kind of bothered me about this episode, how they totally changed it because I just watched season 1 Jessica Jones, and at the end of it, she was getting all these calls, she was ready to go out and be a private detective, do all these cases, and they just changed it all of a sudden. It's oh, well, now she's not doing anything. And also, people say it's just Game of Thrones, but it's not just Game of Thrones. Any show I watch where the passage of time doesn't make sense, I have to bring it up. And it doesn't make sense here because how much time has passed since the end of Jessica Jones? Because we know that the events of Luke Cage take place after the events of Jessica Jones, and then Luke Cage was sent all the way to Georgia, and he comes all the way back, yet Jessica Jones is acting like the events of that her show just took place. What is she sitting around drinking, being on the bender for a year? Trish was talking she had just defeated Kilgrave, it had just happened. Yet all the events of Luke Cage and probably Iron Fist as well definitely happened after. So I don't know. I'm a bit suspect on the passage of time there, but whatever. I suppose. I'm not sure if I don't really give ratings on these thoughts on, I suppose, out of 10 when, I don't know. I don't really think that far ahead, but this is an okay episode. It was fine. It was a good start. I had my little nitpicks, which I sort of complained about, which I always do, but, episode was fine. There's really not much more to say about it until I see where they're going with it, because I'm saying it's a slow build, and that's actually good. I'm actually glad it's a slow build, because the one thing I will say about these Marvel Netflix shows, every single one of them, except for Iron Fist, which gets a lot more hate and flack than it deserves. I'll just put that right out there. Every review I watch of Defender would be like, oh, it's so cool, we get Daredevil, we get Luke Cage, we get Jessica Jones, and then Iron Fist. I was like, it's not that bad. Actually, Iron Fist I actually liked better than a couple of the other seasons, including Luke Cage, because it was the only Marvel Netflix season that was well paced. Every other one, including Jessica Jones, which I really liked, and Daredevil, which I really liked, especially season 2 of Daredevil, was badly paced. They run through their storyline way too quickly, and the last 2 or 4 episodes are unnecessary. They should have shorter seasons. And ironically, Iron Fist was the one that got a lot of flack for being paced bad because the first six episodes were boring. But they weren't boring. They were slow build, and I think it actually worked really well that way. So it could, I think it's like the same here with the Defenders. But the Defenders, there's only 8 episodes in the season, which is a great thing in my opinion. Because I hope all the other future seasons of these Marvel Netflix shows are 8 episodes as well, or at least shorter than 13, because it was definitely too long. It was too long. So I like that they're having a slow build, and I like there's only 8 episodes, because if they go through it too quickly and like, oh, let's throw them all together, blah, they'll probably suck. But other than that, not much to say about it. So I will be back here. Throw out my thoughts as soon as episode 2 comes out. Thanks for watching.